My daughter-in-law publicly insulted me and my family laughed, so I walked out, proved them wrong, and found the strength to start over again. You ever been underestimated by your own family? Or had someone say something so outrageous about you just had to prove them wrong? Well, let me tell you about the day my daughter-in-law told a room full of guests, "I doubt she can live alone for more than a year. She's nothing without this family." And yes, they all laughed. They even recorded it. But what happened next? Well, let's just say I gave them a show they'll never forget. It's funny how you can spend your whole life building a home, only to feel like a stranger in it in a single moment. That Saturday night started out like any other family gathering, my favorite kind, really. The house was alive with the kind of laughter that bounces off the walls and settles into the corners, the kind that makes you forget about your aching feet and the hours you spent in the kitchen. The smell of roast chicken, my secret recipe, the one everyone always asks for, mingled with the buttery aroma of fresh rolls and the sweet promise of apple pie cooling on the counter. The grandkids were running in and out of the living room, their giggles mixing with the clinking of wine glasses and the low hum of conversation. I was in my element, bustling around, making sure everyone had enough to eat, enough to drink, and enough to laugh about. I've always prided myself on being the glue that holds our family together. I'm the one who remembers birthdays, who sends cards for every occasion, who knows everyone's favorite dessert. I'm the one who listens, who smooths over arguments, who makes sure the holidays feel like holidays. And if I'm being honest, I like it that way. Or at least I thought I did. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, had always been a bit of a wild card. She's sharp, quick with a joke, and never afraid to speak her mind. Sometimes I admired her confidence. Other times I wished she'd just take a breath and think before she spoke. But that night I never saw it coming. We were all gathered around the dining table, plates piled high, glasses refilled, when Jessica stood up. She had that look in her eye, the one that usually meant she was about to tell a story or make a toast. She raised her glass, and everyone quieted down, expecting something funny or sweet. Instead, she looked right at me, smiled that tight little smile of hers, and said, "I doubt she can live alone for more than a year. She's nothing without this family." For a split second, the room went silent. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd react. Then, as if on cue, the laughter started. Not the warm, familiar laughter I loved, but something sharper, almost cruel. Phones came out. Someone even started recording, as if this was the highlight of the evening. I looked around the table, searching for a friendly face, someone who might come to my defense, but all I saw were smirks and raised eyebrows. My own son, bless his heart, looked as shocked as I felt, but he didn't say a word. Have you ever wanted the ground to open up and swallow you whole? That was me right then and there. I felt my cheeks flush, my heart pounding in my chest. I thought about all the times I'd stayed up late making costumes for school plays, all the birthday cakes I'd baked from scratch, all the times I'd put everyone else's needs before my own. Was this really how they saw me? As someone who couldn't survive without them? As someone who was, in Jessica's words, nothing? I could have cried. I could have stormed out. I could have let their laughter break me. But something inside me snapped. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was anger, maybe it was just plain old stubbornness. Instead of shrinking away, I straightened my back, forced a smile, and looked Jessica right in the eye. "Why wait a year?" I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. "I'm leaving now." You could have heard a pin drop. For a moment, no one moved. Then, as if in slow motion, I stood up, pushed my chair back, and walked out of the dining room. I didn't slam the door or make a scene. I just walked, my head held high, past the kitchen where the pie was still cooling, past the hallway lined with family photos, past the living room where the grandkids' toys were scattered across the floor. I grabbed my purse from the hook by the door, my favorite purse, the one with the little embroidered flowers, and slipped on my shoes. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a splash of cold water. I could still hear the muffled sounds of laughter and conversation from inside, but I didn't look back. I walked down the driveway, my heart pounding, my mind racing. What was I doing? Where would I go? Was I really about to leave everything behind because of one cruel comment? But as I reached my car, I realized something. I wasn't running away. I was making a choice. For the first time in a long time, I was choosing myself. I was choosing to stand up for the woman I knew I was. The woman who had built a life, a family, a home. The woman who was so much more than nothing. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and took a deep breath. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years I felt a spark of excitement. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. And as I pulled out of the driveway, I couldn't help but smile. After all, if I could survive a dinner party disaster like that, I could survive anything. I don't know if you've ever left a place in a hurry, but let me tell you, there's a certain art to it. You have to move quickly, but not so quickly that you look desperate. You have to keep your head up, even if your heart is pounding in your chest. And most importantly, you have to remember the essentials. For me, that meant my purse, my dignity, and of course, my favorite Tupperware. I mean, let's be honest. You never leave Tupperware behind. I've lost more lids to family gatherings than I care to admit, and I wasn't about to let Jessica get her hands on my best container. So, with my chin up and my Tupperware tucked under my arm, I walked out the door. The look on their faces, oh, it was priceless. Jessica's mouth hung open. My son looked like he'd just seen a ghost, and the rest of the family sat frozen, unsure whether to laugh or apologize. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for them, almost. But then I remembered Jessica's words, she's nothing without this family, and any sympathy I had evaporated. I wasn't nothing. I was a woman who'd spent her whole life giving, loving, and holding everyone together. And if they couldn't see that, well, maybe it was time for them to find out what life was like without me. I made it to my car without shedding a tear, which, if you know me, is a small miracle. I'm the type who cries at commercials, weddings, and even the occasional rerun of A Little House on the Prairie. But that night, I was running on pure adrenaline. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the porch light flicker on. For a moment, I wondered if someone would come running after me, apologize, beg me to stay. But the door stayed closed, and the only thing chasing me was the echo of Jessica's laughter. Driving away, I felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. Could I really do this? Start over at my age? Would I end up talking to my houseplants for company? Spoiler, I already do. My fern Gladys is a great listener, and she never interrupts. But this was different. This wasn't just a night out or a weekend away. This was me stepping into the unknown with nothing but my purse, my Tupperware, and a stubborn sense of self-worth. I didn't have a plan, not really. I just drove, letting the quiet of the night settle around me. The roads were empty, the world hushed, as if it was holding its breath right along with me. I thought about calling a friend, but it was late, and I didn't want to explain what had happened. Not yet. I needed a place to think, to breathe, to figure out what came next. After about 20 minutes, I spotted a little motel on the edge of town, the kind with a neon sign that buzzes and flickers, promising clean rooms and free cable. It wasn't fancy, but it was exactly what I needed. I pulled in, parked under a flickering streetlight, and sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. Was I really doing this? Was I really spending the night in a motel alone at my age? The thought made me laugh, a real, honest-to-goodness laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside. If nothing else, at least I'd have a story to tell. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of coffee and lemon-scented cleaner. The woman at the front desk looked up from her crossword puzzle and gave me a tired smile. "Rough night?" she asked, her eyes kind. "You could say that," I replied, managing a smile of my own. "Just need a place to rest my head." She handed me a key, an actual key, not one of those plastic cards, and pointed me toward room 7. "Breakfast is at 7. Coffee's strong, but it'll wake you up." I thanked her and made my way to the room. It was small but clean, with a bedspread covered in faded roses and a little table by the window. I set my purse and Tupperware down, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time all night, the reality of what I'd done hit me. I was alone. No family, no noise, no one asking for anything. Just me in a quiet room with nothing but my thoughts for company. At first, the silence felt heavy, almost suffocating. I kept expecting my phone to ring, for someone to call and demand I come home. But the phone stayed silent, and slowly the quiet began to feel less like loneliness and more like freedom. I could breathe, I could think, I could just be. I made myself a cup of tea with the little kettle in the room, sat by the window and watched the headlights of passing cars flicker across the wall. I thought about all the years I'd spent putting everyone else first, about all the times I'd swallowed my feelings to keep the peace. Maybe it was time to put myself first for a change. Maybe it was time to find out who I was, apart from being a mother, a wife, a grandmother. As I sipped my tea, I realized I wasn't running away. I was running towards something, my own freedom, and maybe, just maybe, a little peace and quiet. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope. Tomorrow was a new day, and for once, it belonged to me. There's something about a quiet motel room at night that makes you feel both invisible and exposed at the same time. I'd always thought of myself as someone who could handle anything. But as I sat there wrapped in a scratchy motel blanket, sipping a cup of tea that tasted faintly of lemon and nostalgia, I felt the weight of the day settle on my shoulders. The TV was playing a rerun of Molly Golden Girls, the one where Dorothy finally stands up for herself, which felt a little too on the nose for my current situation. I tried to lose myself in the familiar banter, but my mind kept drifting back to the dinner table, to Jessica's words, to the laughter that had stung more than any insult ever could. I glanced at my phone, half hoping, half dreading that someone would call. The silence was both a relief and a disappointment. I wondered what they were saying about me now. Was Jessica still holding court, making jokes at my expense? Was my son defending me, or was he just sitting there, letting it all happen? The questions swirled in my mind, each one heavier than the last. I tried to tell myself that I didn't care, that I was better off without them, but the truth was, I missed my family. I missed the chaos, the noise, the sense of belonging, even if it came with a side of heartache. Just as I was about to turn off the TV and try to get some sleep, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with my son's name, and my heart leapt into my throat. For a moment, I just stared at it, afraid to see what he might say. Was he angry? Was he siding with Jessica? Was he going to tell me to come home and apologize for making a scene? My hands shook as I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over the message icon. I took a deep breath and opened it. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she'd say that. I love you. Please come home when you're ready, or let's find a place for just us. I miss you already." I read the message once, then again, as if the words might change if I looked at them long enough. But they didn't. They stayed right there, glowing on the screen, warm and real, and exactly what I needed to hear. I felt a lump rise in my throat, and before I knew it, the tears started to fall. Not the pretty movie star tears you see in the movies, but the real, messy, snotty kind that leave your nose red and your eyes puffy. I pressed the phone to my chest and let myself cry, really cry, for the first time in what felt like years. It's funny, isn't it? How sometimes it takes a little chaos to see who really cares. I'd spent so much of my life trying to keep the peace, to make sure everyone else was happy, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be cared for in return. My son's message was a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't as alone as I felt. He saw me, not just as the woman who cooked his meals and folded his laundry, but as a person with feelings, with needs, with a heart that could be broken and mended. I thought about all the times I'd put myself last, all the times I'd bitten my tongue to avoid an argument, all the times I'd let Jessica's sharp words slide off my back because I didn't want to cause trouble. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe standing up for myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. Maybe it was the only way to teach the people around me how to treat me. I wiped my eyes and typed out a reply, my fingers trembling. "Thank you, sweetheart. I needed to hear that. I love you too. I just need a little time to think, but I'm so proud of you for reaching out. We'll figure this out together." I hit send and set the phone down, feeling lighter than I had in days. The tears kept coming, but now they were mixed with relief, with gratitude, with a strange sense of hope. Maybe things wouldn't go back to the way they were. Maybe that was a good thing. Maybe this was a chance to start over, to build something new, something stronger, more honest, more loving. I looked around the little motel room, at the faded wallpaper and the humming mini fridge, and realized that I wasn't afraid anymore. I was still sad, still hurt, but I wasn't afraid. I knew who I was, and I knew that I deserved better than to be the punchline at my own dinner table. I deserved respect, kindness, and love, not just from my family, but from myself. As the night wore on, I found myself smiling through the tears. I thought about all the women I knew, friends, neighbors, even strangers at the grocery store, who had been through something similar. How many of us had stayed silent, thinking it was easier to keep the peace than to speak up? How many of us had forgotten that we were worthy of more? I made a promise to myself right then and there that I wouldn't go back to the way things were. I would go home when I was ready, but I would go home on my own terms. I would set boundaries, speak my truth, and demand the respect I deserved. And if that meant things changed, so be it. Change was scary, but it was also necessary. It was the only way to grow. As I drifted off to sleep, the last thing I saw was my son's message still glowing on the screen. I clutched my phone to my chest and whispered a quiet thank you to the universe. I wasn't alone. I was loved. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the thin motel curtains, painting golden stripes across the faded bedspread. For a moment, I just lay there, listening to the distant hum of cars on the highway and the cheerful chirping of birds outside. It was the first time in years I'd woken up without a to-do list running through my mind, without the weight of someone else's expectations pressing down on my chest. I stretched, feeling the stiffness in my back, and smiled to myself. I was still here. I had survived the night, the storm, and the sting of Jessica's words, and to my surprise, I felt a sense of possibility blooming inside me. A quiet, persistent hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. I made myself a cup of motel coffee, strong enough to wake the dead, but exactly what I needed, and sat by the window, watching the world wake up. I thought about all the mornings I'd spent rushing around, making breakfast for everyone else, packing lunches, finding lost shoes, smoothing over arguments before they could ruin the day. I thought about how I'd always put myself last, convinced that was what good mothers and wives did. But as I sipped my coffee, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't nothing without them. I was me, and that was more than enough. My phone buzzed, and I saw a new message from my son. "Good morning, Mom. Call me when you're up, I love you." My heart softened. I dialed his number, and when he answered, his voice was thick with worry and relief. We talked for hours, longer than we had in years. We talked about everything, about boundaries, about respect, about how things had gotten so tangled up that we'd forgotten how to really see each other. He apologized again for Jessica's words, for not standing up for me, for letting things get so out of hand. I told him I forgave him, but that things had to change. I couldn't go back to being the family doormat, the one everyone leaned on but never really saw. We laughed, too, about the motel coffee, about my dramatic exit, about how I'd managed to leave with my favorite Tupperware intact. "You always were the strong one, Mom," he said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. It made me realize how much I'd missed that connection, how much I'd missed being seen for who I really was, not just what I did for everyone else. We made a plan. I'd come home, but on my own terms. There would be new rules, new boundaries. Jessica and I would have to talk, really talk, not just trade polite smiles over the dinner table. And if things didn't change, if I still felt small and invisible, I'd find a place of my own. My son even offered to help me look for apartments, just in case. The thought of starting over was scary, but it was also exhilarating. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had choices. I wasn't trapped. I wasn't powerless. I was the author of my own story. After we hung up, I took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away the last traces of doubt and fear. I looked at myself in the mirror, really looked, and saw a woman who had weathered storms, who had loved fiercely, who had given everything she had and still had more to give. I saw strength in the lines around my eyes, wisdom in the silver streaks in my hair. I saw someone worth fighting for. I packed up my things, my purse, my dignity, my trusty Tupperware, and checked out of the motel. The woman at the front desk gave me a knowing smile. "You look lighter today," she said. "Whatever happened, I hope you know you deserve to be happy." I thanked her, feeling a lump in my throat. Sometimes it's the kindness of strangers that reminds us of our own worth. Driving home, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The world looked different, brighter somehow, as if the universe was cheering me on. I thought about all the women I knew who had been underestimated, who had been told they were nothing without their families, their husbands, their roles. I wanted to reach through the radio and tell them all, "You are enough. You are strong. You are worthy of love and respect just as you are." When I walked through my front door, the house felt different. It was still the same photos on the walls, the same familiar smells, but I was different. I was no longer willing to shrink myself to fit someone else's idea of who I should be. I was ready to take up space, to speak my truth, to demand the respect I deserved. Jessica was in the kitchen, her face pale and anxious. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. It wasn't easy. There were tears, apologies, and promises to do better. I told her how her words had hurt me, how I needed to be seen and valued, not just tolerated. She listened, really listened, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. It wouldn't be perfect overnight, but it was a start. So ladies, if you've ever felt underestimated, remember, you're stronger than you think, and sometimes the best way to prove it is to walk out the door with your head held high and your Tupperware in tow. Life is too short to live small. You deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be loved for exactly who you are. And if you ever forget that, just remember my story and know that a new beginning is always possible, no matter your age or stage in life. If this story made you laugh, cry, or just nod your head in agreement, hit that subscribe button. Share your own stories in the comments because we're all in this together. And trust me, you're never too old for a new beginning.